Почитувани граѓани, почитувани...
Dear citizens, dear media, good afternoon and welcome to our joint press conference of the Deputy Prime Minister for European Affairs, Mr. Bojan Maricik, and the head of the EU delegation in our country, Mr. David Geer. After their welcoming addresses, in the follow-up, we will have questions from the media. Ambassador Geer will take the floor first.
Thank you very much and good morning. I would like to give an overview of the country report for North Macedonia, which was presented yesterday in Brussels and which I have presented to the President of Parliament, to the Prime Minister, and I'm pleased to present to the Deputy Prime Minister, and this morning to the President of the Supreme Court. A word on context, first of all. It's clear that this report comes in a special context. Special because Russia's invasion of Ukraine has created a new geopolitical reality, putting the enlargement agenda to the very front of the EU's agenda. Special because once again the EU and Western Balkan leaders at the summit in June 2022 reaffirmed the unequivocal commitment to the enlargement perspective. And special above all because on the 19th of July, an intergovernmental conference took place opening accession negotiations with North Macedonia and with Albania, and I'm pleased that the screening process is proceeding now in Brussels. This is a historic moment, a clear recognition of the determination of North Macedonia to implement EU-related reforms. The country is now a negotiating country, and it's important to see this report in that context. Being a negotiating country means that there are responsibilities and opportunities for the country, and it puts a particular focus on the need to move forward on the reforms and follow the recommendations contained in the report itself. Now, as you know, the report provides an overview of progress in implementing EU reforms. It's comprehensive, some 110, 113 pages, covering political and economic criteria and the implementation and the adoption of EU laws and standards across all relevant sectors. And it follows the model of clusters, bringing together the different chapters of the key in accordance with the new methodology. The headline would be that North Macedonia continued its efforts to strengthen democracy and the rule of law. Despite some challenges, the country has shown its commitment to continuing to deliver results in key areas of the fundamentals. Obviously the report is much too comprehensive to go into detail, so let me choose a few areas to illustrate some of the issues which come up in the report and some of the recommendations contained in it. And I would like really to start within the fundamentals cluster with some of the areas which will be familiar to you. Obviously, Commissioner Vahey yesterday in the press conference in Brussels mentioned the electoral reform, but let me start with Parliament. The report obviously covers both positive and more negative aspects and areas which need to be developed. It says that the work of Parliament was marred by political polarization, which delayed the adoption of many pieces of legislation. It expressed concern, in particular, following the lack of consensus for the appointment of key appointments, such as the new judges of the Constitutional Court, the 5 deputy ombudsmen, the 2 members of the Council of Public Prosecutors, members of the Programme Council of the Public Service Broadcaster, and the Council of the Agency for Audio and Audio-Visual Media Services, as well as a member of the Commission for the Protection and Prevention Against Discrimination. It notes that appointments to these positions should be on merit and not on political grounds. It also called for joint and prompt efforts by all parties as a matter of priority to strengthen Parliament's role as a forum for constructive political dialogue, particularly on the EU reform agenda. And given that the country is now a negotiating country, this is more important than ever. It noted the need for proper planning and consultation to limit the use of fast-track procedures in order to allow for effective scrutiny of and consultation on legislation. It noted that the number of laws which were adopted in shortened procedures had decreased slightly, but they still remain high. These need to be significantly limited as they reduce the opportunities for inclusive legislative processes and meaningful debates. You will, of course, look at the report in more detail, which goes into quite a lot more detail on the activities of Parliament. Turning to the judiciary as one aspect of the rule of law, the report concludes, as previously, that the judicial system is moderately prepared. Some progress was achieved in the field of the judiciary. For example, the preparation of a new judicial reform strategy has started in an inclusive manner, building upon the lessons learned from the previous one. Implementation of the updated action plan on the judicial reform strategy has continued, but needs to be more systematic. The pace of implementation of the human resources strategies for the judiciary and the prosecution services need to be stepped up. And these are, of course, important because they touch on all issues of developing a truly meritocratic system. It notes that the judicial institutions have implemented consistently the new rules for the appointment, promotion, discipline and dismissal of judges and prosecutors, but notes also that in the higher courts there are delays in promotion and that the scheduled retirements further decrease the number of judges and prosecutors. Once more, it says that any new draft law on the Academy for Judges and Prosecutors should maintain the Academy as the sole entry point to the judiciary and prosecution, and it should ensure that that access to these professions is fair and transparent. There should be no shortening of courses. The report comments on the efforts to upgrade the software system, on the ACMES system, the Automated Court Case Management Information System, which of course is important in terms of transparency and fairness. As regards the Judicial Council and the Council of Public Prosecutors, it notes various steps taken in the course of the year, but says that both councils need to continue pursuing their commitment to full respect for the principle of the independence of judiciary, and increasing transparency needs to continue in both councils. It's important, it says, to ensure that the judiciary is shielded from any risk or perception of undue external interference. On public administration reform, the country remains moderately prepared in terms of its reform efforts. It made limited progress in implementing last year's recommendation. It adopted a new 2022 to 2025 public financial management reform programme. The report notes that the State Commission for the Prevention of Corruption has been proactive in addressing cases of nepotism, cronyism and political influence in the process of recruiting public sector employees and in the process of appointing members of supervisory and management boards. However, follow-up of its recommendations should be ensured. Last year's recommendations were not sufficiently addressed, and they remain valid this year, in particular the adoption of the law on administrative servants and on public service employees, the law on top management service, the adoption of a law on the organisation and operation of state administrative bodies, and ensure the full implementation on the law on general administrative procedures. All of these are particularly important in a context where negotiations have started and the capacity of the administration to deliver will become ever more important. On corruption, the report concludes that the country is moderately prepared in the prevention and fight against corruption. However, corruption remains prevalent in many areas and is an issue of concern. Some progress has been made as the country continues to consolidate its performance in investigating, prosecuting, and trying several corruption cases, including at a high level. And the cases initiated by the former Special Prosecutor's Office continue to move forward, establishing accountability for the illegal wiretaps. I have mentioned already the proactive stance of the State Commission for the Prevention of Corruption, which is an important institution in this regard. Additional human and financial resources should be made available to the Public Prosecution Office, investigative centres and law enforcement units in charge of investigating corruption. A word on the economic criteria, and you will see very detailed information in the report covering all aspects of it. Let me just take, for example, one area, the existence of a functioning market economy. Here, North Macedonia has made some progress and is at a good level of preparation in developing a functioning market economy. In 2021, the economy largely recovered from the COVID-19 crisis, partly reflecting the fiscal support measures which were implemented to help the recovery. Although the report essentially covers the period up to the end of July, we were able to record a positive development, which was the adoption of the organic budget law, which provides for fiscal rules and a fiscal council, which were adopted in mid-September, as you know. The banking sector, for example, remained sound, liquid and profitable, and financial stability was bolstered by progress on some key legislation. Of course, there are problems which persist. The business environment continued to be impeded by the large size of the informal economy and slow progress in streamlining para-fiscal charges. One area which has marked very good progress is the common foreign and security policy. Obviously, this country has taken an outstanding position in terms of the war in Ukraine and demonstrated that it is a reliable partner by aligning to 100% with the common foreign and security policy of the European Union. Just a few words then at the end by way of headlines. First, as I've said, the background, Ukraine and the context has changed the geopolitical context and increased the importance of enlargement for the EU and our partners, here, including here in the Western Balkans. Secondly, we are conscious that we are all in the EU and beyond living in difficult times. Governments across the EU and beyond have had to address huge, unexpected economic and social challenges, just as the expectation was that our economies would start to recover from the COVID pandemic. As I've said, we are in a changed situation. This is now a negotiating country. This carries with it many opportunities and responsibilities, but it means that there is an urgency to carry out reforms, and there is a need for more dynamism to progress on reforms. And that's why this report has a new importance. These reforms will bring the country into the European Union. They will also positively transform the country in terms of prosperity, stability, and democratic principles. In short, the screening process, which is proceeding positively, needs to go hand in hand with reforms. And last of all, this is not just a job for government, although obviously government has a leading role. This needs to be part of a national project involving all parts of the political divide and all parts of society, government, opposition, state institutions, local government, civil society, business, and indeed, ordinary citizens. Thank you very much. And I'd like to just take this opportunity to formally hand over the report to the Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Your Ambassador Geer. Mr. Maricik, please take the floor. Thank you very much, dear Ambassador Geer. Dear citizens, dear media representatives, as a country which is negotiating for full-fledged membership in the EU and a country which is in a screening process, North Macedonia yesterday got a positive annual report issued by the European Commission for the period 2022. It is the first report following the opening of the accession negotiations in July this year. After the review as well as analysis of the report by the Secretariat for European Affairs, I'm very happy that we have sustainable reforms. We have a recognized progress, and ahead of us are big opportunities, new opportunities. At the very beginning, the European Commission welcomes the start of the accession process, which was confirmed by the Commissioner Varhey during the yesterday press conference with his statement that the holding of the intergovernmental conference in July 2022 is a new turnabout in the relations between the EU and the Republic of North Macedonia, because the accession negotiations have started. This is a recognition for the commitment of the Republic of North Macedonia to the implementation of the reforms, especially in the cluster of fundamentals, which assesses that the progress in the judiciary is continuing, and they request for the judiciary to be more autonomous and more independent. In continuation, I would just like to make a short analysis of the report. A report which gives always a very objective assessment of the progress, but it also identifies those spheres where we have to increase our efforts and to deliver better results. The government, in the last 6 years, it always has been perceiving the EC report as a very objective review, as a very objective assessment, and as a guideline, as a guide for the future reform. From the point of view of the overall commitment and preparedness, North Macedonia is still the best ranking in the region in the cluster of fundamentals, which is the most important one for the dynamic, but also in the cluster agriculture and cohesion, in the cluster competitiveness and inclusive growth, as well as the green agenda. We're right below Montenegro and Serbia, which are negotiating for a long period of time, whereas in the point cluster, market economy, we're at the same level. The assessment for the overall preparedness for 2022, the Republic of North Macedonia has a good level of preparedness. From the point of view of a progress, we have maintained the pace of a progress out of total 33, whereas in the rest 20, spheres, there is a limited progress. But for 90%, we have either a partial or a 90% of preparedness. This shows that besides the external and internal challenges and the very difficult context environment that we have been functioning and the challenges that we have been facing, after all, we have a stable continuity regarding the overall, preparedness of our country, which should be an additional impetus for us in the period till the next EC report. The Republic of North Macedonia has confirmed its orientation and commitments to the European Union in this new geopolitical context, but at the same time, it is the first country which joined to the EU in regards of sanctions regarding the Russian invasion in Ukraine, but also aligning its policy with the common and security policy of the EU. This step shows that the Republic of North Macedonia is a credible partner of the Union, having in mind the current challenges that we're all facing. I would like to avail the opportunity to launch an appeal for the country and the countries of the region to be part of the mechanisms of the EU, for us to be able to supply with all those sources, energy sources, in order to ease the energy crisis, respectively with electricity and food items. In the part of the political criteria, the EC has confirmed that North Macedonia has continued with its efforts in order to strengthen democracy and rule of law. Besides a number of challenges, the local elections back in 2021 have been assessed as competitive and with respecting basic freedoms, and we have the obligation for revision of the electoral law in accordance with the ODHR recommendation inclusive process. In regards of the parliament, as the ambassador already pointed out, we have a very clear critiques regarding the fast track procedure of adoption of the law. First and foremost, we have the critics of the blockages of the opposition. There is an appeal to have a constructive dialogue, especially for the EU-related agenda. and to also have a priority on the constitutional changes. In regards of the judicial system, it is noted that the judicial organs, they have demonstrated their commitment to protect their integrity and autonomy, whereas the Judicial Council and the Council of Public Prosecutors to implement the action plan. Also, we have to focus on the strategy implementation of the reform strategy in the judiciary in the part of the fight against corruption. There is an assessment that the country has consolidated, has continued to consolidate its track record for investigation and prosecution of corruption, including high-profile cases. Also, the country has continued with the proactive approach. The State Anti-Corruption Commission, it has continued with its proactive approach in fighting corruption. Of course, we have the obligation here in order to continue the strengthening of the capacities in order to tackle corruption. In regards of the human rights, the assessment is that the national legal framework is on the same line with the EU standards. It has been noted that the need of deinstitutionalization and gender-related budgeting, as well as providing support of domestic violence victims. Also, we have to do that in compliance with the recommendations of the Torture Committee when it comes to the detainees. In the part of freedom expression, media expression, there is an assessment that the media have a favorable climate to have a critical media reporting, but we also have the obligation there to have the Council for Audio and Audiovisual Services and the broadcasting services, as well as to improve the rights of the media workers. In the part of the reform, public administration reforms, the adoption of the new program for public management finances for 2022-2025, but also there's an obligation to adopt a law which regulates the law of the public administration, such as the law administrative workers, as well as the civil servants, as well as a new law on top management, as well as the new strategy for public administration reform. In regards of the economic criteria, the country has a good level of preparedness in the development of a functional market economy. In 2021, as the ambassador already mentioned, the economy largely has managed to recover from 2019 pandemic, whereas the country has developed fiscal measures in order to help the recovery. We had a new law on organic budget, whose implementation will contribute to increasing the fiscal transparency and fiscal management. It goes without saying that what will be the main challenges, both for the government in circumstances of energy crisis, it will be to provide as much support as possible for the economy and the vulnerable categories of citizens, whereas with the latest fiscal measures, the country is doing that. We have to continue with the reforms in order to improve the fiscal management as well as the sustainability of public finances. What is of special importance is the ascertainment of the Commission that the screening process is going well, whereas the country shows a big level of a commitment. For us, this process must be inclusive and transparent, whereas with the inclusion of the CCO sector and experts in the negotiation process, together with the EU funds, which are at our availability, that is a new possibility to deliver even faster reforms. It goes without saying that this is an important stimulus, not only for the government, but also for the administration. I do believe for the whole society to continue with even bigger commitment as well as dynamic in the implementation of the reforms. Commissioner Varhey, in his press conference, stressed that the Republic of North Macedonia should use the momentum and unveil its all capacity through the implementation of reforms, and we're going to do that. I couldn't agree more that with national consensus and the government as the leading authority of the negotiations, with the civil society, the parliament, the academic society, and all the respective stakeholders, we will together bring to life the commitment to be ready for full-fledged membership till 2030, which actually we have committed to this goal at the first intergovernmental conference. Our task is to continue with the reforms. We're aware that the full-fledged membership in the EU is of our interest. We have to work together in order to overcome the weaknesses as well as to unite over this national task. For this purpose, the Secretary for European Affairs will organize a range of panel discussions under the slogan on the European path path, new reforms, new opportunities. And already the first one will take place tomorrow, and we will open a discussion in front of the institutional representatives about the clusters 1 and 6 fundamental values and external relations, where the next weeks there will be 2 more panel discussions for the rest of the clusters. All the recommendations contained in the report will discuss together, and that will be as a guideline to update the national program for the adoption of the acquis together with the, like I said, with the acquis which has been presented at the explanatory screening. This document will be revised this year. It will serve as a basis for the negotiation positions of the country. At the end, I would like to thank Ambassador Geer for his whole support, as well as the cooperation, as well as for the cooperation with the delegation of the EU. I would like to repeat that all future reforms will be implemented in partnership and close cooperation with the services of the EU and the member states. Thank you very much. So now we'll take journalist questions. The floor is yours. I have a question for both of them, for Maricik and for Ambassador Geer. In part of the remarks of the country report, there are critics in regards to the efficiency of the parliament, that the reforms, there is a delay in the reforms, and that the laws are adopted in a fast-track procedure. We again listen to your explanation that is because of the blockage of the opposition. However, there's another part of the story. The opposition says that the government, the ruling majority, very often does not listen to them, does not even bother to achieve a consensus with them, that they use force, and very often a short procedure is used for adoption of laws. Therefore, I would like to ask you, what is it that you as a government will do in order to have a bigger level of inclusiveness in the process? And also a question for Ambassador Geer in regards of the opening of the Bulgarian associations clubs in our country, that in a way is linked to the European path of North Macedonia, because we know, the negotiations which are held with neighboring Bulgaria and all the challenges there, it's very probably that Bulgaria, for the opening of these associations, they will identify them with respecting the rights of Bulgarian citizens in our country. But it's more than obvious that these associations are opened with controversial names, not only for the country and for the current history, but also they are controversial for the overall history, for the European history. Well, I don't know whether you will tell me whether, the names of these associations are controversial, and in a way our country is obliged to respect the opening of these associations. But it's more than obvious that these associations present an enormous provocation for the biggest part of the citizens in our country. Thank you very much. Functioning of Parliament is a very important element of the topic of the cluster. Functioning of the democratic institutions, which is a topic which constantly is present in the European reports, but now it has been upgraded. It has been put on in one of the 3 topics based on which this guideline for the reforms will be formed, which will be valid and will be significant for the very end, till the very end. So we have for the rule of law, one is for the function of democratic institution, and the third topic is the reforms, public administration reforms. So therefore, we really pay a big attention to this. Otherwise, the laws are always adopted with a majority. It's always been since the very existence of Parliament. Adoption of the laws with a majority does not mean that laws are adopted by force. These are the principles which every democracy functions on. We as a ruling majority in the parliament, myself personally as a representative of the government at the parliament coordination meetings, we always do our best in order to observe the procedures, to have enough space for discussion, and we have shown this demonstrated by taking on board different amendments. By the opposition when they have proposed for some laws. After all, however, I cannot agree with you that the blame is with the government if the opposition MPs decide to drag forever the adoption of the laws, which has never been the case. We have had disagreements in the previous composition of the parliament. It comes to the appointment of the constitutional judges, especially to have a total blockage of the parliament, which would, as a result, have a dysfunctional constitutional court. We think that is not a democratic instrument to use. We do believe that there is room to discuss about every topic, but of course it goes without saying that all decisions in parliament are reached with a majority of votes. But those laws, for instance, which require two-thirds majority, for instance, those which are already in a parliamentary procedure, for instance, the law on contentious procedure, it is a legitimate right to discuss about how one should reach a two-thirds majority for those laws. I do plan in the framework, in the capacities of chief negotiator and as Deputy Prime Minister for European Affairs, I have said publicly that we have to reach out to the Parliamentary Committee for European Integration, where Nikolovsky, actually, this National Council for European Integration, we have to discuss how this National Council will have a role in order to present, that is, to discuss our negotiation positions, but also, together with the National Council for European Integration, we should sit down and agree, and practically, for the National Council to adopt the reform agenda, which would be proposed by the government after this country report, because this is a guide not only for the government, it is for the state, for all of us to ascertain the measures based on the findings of the EC report, and for that to be adopted as a reform plan, for that to go without blockades and where it is possible and with the support of the opposition. We are prepared for that, and of course we'll continue. Of course, I'm reaching out to the opposition. I'm saying this publicly. Of course, if we act with responsibility, if for the interest of the integration process, to reach an agreement how the European reform agenda should not be a victim of our party or political differences, which unfortunately they are being depicted in parliament in a way that it is being blocking, the parliament, knowing that it is the main legislative body.
Let me abuse my position and make one comment on the first question. And just to repeat, that the success of the enlargement process will depend upon there being consensus across the political divide on the European orientation of the country and the implementation of EU reforms. And there's a responsibility on all political actors to try to make that work. Turning to the clubs, which you've mentioned, as you can imagine, I'm not going to get into interpretations of history. Let me say this. This country has a good record as regards the relationship between communities. This is important, and it's important that the rights of the different communities are respected. And it's also important that there are efforts by everyone to promote mutual understanding and to avoid tensions. I note in regard to the specific incident that happened yesterday, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs came out very clearly with a strong statement, making it clear that the line had been crossed on that particular issue. So I think that is what I'd like to say on that issue. Thank you.
Adrian Alpha. Thank you. First and foremost, I'm interested. I have a question for Geer, whether in the European Union, do you tolerate deputy prime ministers and ministers who are not transparent, respectively those who hide the spending, they do not provide any reports? In such cases, how do you proceed? And whether you personally hide the spending that you do and which should be covered by the European Commission. Deputy Prime Minister Maricik, will you finally reveal us what have you drunk and what have you eaten, and when are you going to present the bills, the food bills, because you have avoided this question 3 times.
I'm not going to be drawn into specific comments. Let me say, as a general principle, public finance management is part of the fundamentals within the accession process, and as the process advances here, of course, there will always be a focus upon good public finance management. It's also an issue within the EU itself, within the institutions, and within the member states. It's important that they are always at the highest standards. But I make it clear I'm making no comments on any specific cases. I'm just replying to the general issue of public finance management.
Благодарам на прашањето.
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Landov. To your first question, we have fully responded. Otherwise, you wouldn't have material ammunition to have a whole serial soap opera to write about. In regards of the expenditures of these efforts, you have addressed it to the wrong address that we indicated to you. Once we indicated that to you, actually, to the institutions to share the necessary information, you got an invitation to come to the Secretariat for European Affairs and for yourself to have an inspection in the food bills. You refused that to do, and now the next stage, we will provide for you all the necessary information, but the general public needs to know that you had the possibility to scrutinize all the documents, but you refused to. Therefore, in the future, we will solve all misunderstanding in an institutional way. I think that there's nothing for us to hide, and that our institution and every institution that I have been in charge of has regularly provided reports, be it through the Institution for Management of Public Finances and other institutions. Thank you. Can he speak? Can he use the mic, please? Can he use the mic, please? I already responded to the question. You can make your question in writing, and I will gladly respond to that. But we offered you to scrutinize the bills, but you refused that. And for Deputy Prime Minister Maricik, actually, many questions in one in regards of the opening of the Bulgarian associations. The second Bulgarian association was opened. We got by the government that you only see that as a provocation. How come the Macedonian government does not officially react to the official Sofia? Because we already had a statement by their Minister of Foreign Affairs that he supports the opening of such association. There's no problem in that. Actually, that means direct interference in the internal affairs of our country. How come there's no official reaction by our government? On the other side, what is your comment regarding the latest developments in the associations in Ohrid? The signboard was broken there. Do you believe that maybe such incidents will be used by Bulgaria in a certain period, at a certain stage during the negotiation process, actually to use them in a bad direction in terms of the relations between the two countries? First and foremost, I think that the government already issued a reaction by a number of official functionaries, and that reaction is determinate. And we don't believe that the names of such associations or contribute to the relations. We do believe that there are controversials. We believe that we, as a member of NATO, a member of Council of Europe, of OSCE, candidate for membership in the European Union, we should solve these issues at institutional level. We don't believe that violence is solution, does not contribute to solving of problems. We do believe that the National Registry, the public prosecution, they have also options to act upon these things in order to preserve the public rule and order within the existing laws. I mean in the context of the names of these associations, based on the information that I have, the Central Registry has already acted upon this case, but I think, as far as I know, there's an ongoing work of the ad hoc body, which was informed by the Ministry of Justice, which will introduce legal changes in order to further define and prescribe these issues with the possible and permissible names of civic associations. Otherwise, at the moment, we have one of the most liberal laws in Europe when it comes to formation of associations and foundations. I do believe that that is good, but on the other hand, that creates and opens different issues when it comes to defining the limits normal in accordance with the international as well as European conventions, defining the limits of the freedom of assembly, of association. I mean, and that's how it should be actually in accordance with the Convention on Human Rights. But we do believe that in the framework of this permitted civic association, we have to define it additional in order to avoid this kind of situation. I do believe that the opening of whatever club, I mean, whichever club, whichever association in the Republic of North Macedonia is not a problem in itself, but when you call it by using controversial names, of course, it presents a challenge for the public security, and public rule and order. As we could see ourselves, we face with such situation. Therefore, I do believe that we're going to address this issue and we'll define it in accordance with the practice of other democratic countries as of how they regulate, how they define this issue when it comes to names of associations of citizens by using controversial names of historic issues. I think that if we implement those standards, we'll not have any problem. And again, I will repeat that the institutions have to act. That is far more important and far better rather than having individual acts of violence, which of course it goes without saying that they do not present a solution for this problem, which on the other hand will provide arguments for a confirmation of some theses which we know that are not true. But you did not react to the institutions in Bulgaria. I think that there is regular communication between the ministries of foreign affairs between the two countries, and they are communicated in adequate way and with an adequate reaction. This is my information. For further details, please address the Minister of Foreign Affairs. But I do believe Yes, but the Minister of Foreign Affairs, they said that they're not competent in providing comments regarding names of associations. As contact persons, as contact points between the two countries have been appointed the Ministries of Foreign Affairs of both countries regarding all issues for implementation of the protocol, hate speech, and so on. I do believe that there is a regular communication which set out all the issues which are necessary for good implementation or for keeping the maintain good level of neighborhood. I have a question both for you and for Ambassador Geer. I would like now to get you back to the country report. Deputy Prime Minister has several remarks which are repetitive in many country reports. Amongst other, the Parliament has been in a way upgraded. Again, you said that will depend on the opposition, but I think that after all, it will depend on the government. If we want to have a track record, still you have to do more. You cannot wait for the opposition to change its mind and to start working. The second part is about the Anti-Corruption Commission or the Commission for Fight Against Corruption. It's again, mentioned that it needs human resources and financial resources, which is mentioned both by the Commission and both in the reports. My point is whether you will work on that, and also a question in the part of the reform of the public administration reform. Now it is put in the first cluster, and it was shown that we have not marked progress. Whether it is true, the information which was published yesterday by the president of the trade unions, whether the recommendations of the government, whether this is part of the reforms, decreasing the salaries, but about reorganization and also cutting down of the jobs. When are you going to start with the public administration reform? Actually, whether I'm sure that on Top Tema on Telma TV, the president of the trade union said, I haven't seen that, but I will do, whether once you decrease the salaries, there are different measures related to the administration which is suspension of the collective contracts agreements, a reorganization, 30% of the administration to send them home, a revision of the scope of work of the administration, which could bring to decrease of salary. I'm just saying what I mean, Ambassador Geer. You already mentioned the parliament. The report says that North Macedonia has marked progress in increasing the democratic process, but after all, the parliament remains a problem. How much can the parliament make a problem out of the screening process, especially speaking about the delay of the adoption of laws? And I have to get you back to the Bulgarian Association. Yesterday, Commissioner Varhey avoided to respond directly to this question. It is undisputed that all communities can open association, but the problem is the controversial names. Whether in your country, any community can open an association of a fascist occupator, which in your country, I mean, a fascist occupator who 80 years ago had direct consequences over your nation. Why do you avoid that topic? And I'm speaking concretely about the Bulgarians when it comes to the association, to the club, whether the Bulgarians are entitled to this kind, which is to, again, I mean, take out these figures from history who were left somewhere behind 80 years ago. And again, Mr. Maricik, apologies, but one more question, but at the very end. No. You can, because the ambassador will have to go. It's not important now. I mean, I lost it. In regards to Parliament, I think that I have concretely explained what we can do. I agree. This is why I'm saying, for a start, it's good that the opposition starts to come to the parliament coordination meetings, because at the moment that's not the case. Yesterday, there was a coordination meeting. No, I mean, I'm sorry. You again are repeating the goodwill of the opposition. What are you going to do as a government? Let me continue. At the Parliament coordination meeting is the place where they agree about all issues related to the functioning of the Parliament and with their daily agenda regarding that week. I have attended those meetings where the opposition has been there, and when there were an agreement over issues, how they will function and how the opposition has participated in the discussions in the appropriate manner, and in the solution of questions, as well as in the adoption of laws, because representatives of opposition, they chair very important parliamentary commissions. Also, they share part of the responsibility. Of course, there are mechanisms which goes beyond to their goodwill by, I mean, convoking 1/3 of the MPs to convoke a meeting of the parliamentary committee meeting, but that means that there is a strategy of the opposition to make the parliament dysfunctional. So we're speaking about political strategy, not about an incident. I think that we as a government will do our best in the framework of the democratic instruments to make the parliament functioning as good as possible. But however, we cannot, I mean, in a way, a relief of responsibility of the opposition in that part of function of the parliament. I would say that, again, we have reached out to the National Council for Euro Affairs and its president, Alexander Nikolovsky, to sit down together and discuss how do we do a reform agenda which is related to the ECU report, which in Parliament, when it comes to the legislative part of that agenda, that would go without blockage and without any kind of obstacles, and at the same time it will give the possibility of the opposition to participate, to criticize, to propose, because ahead of us is a process in which we have to review as well as define the negotiating positions of the country regarding different topics. How much time do we need for implementation of a certain law, for its adoption, and then for its implementation? We cannot cannot do that without the parliament. I mean, we cannot skip the parliament because that's how our system is like. Therefore, I think that we're constantly making efforts and we shall continue making efforts. However, we cannot circumvent the political strategy of the opposition to make the parliament dysfunctional. You can see that under these difficult circumstances, there's adoption of laws, the procedures are moving forward. All that's going very slowly, but now we're making efforts and we are prepared to continue making efforts. But what is important is for the consensus related to the agenda to be shown in practice, in black and white, rather than just having it as a political declaration. In regards of the Anti-Corruption Commission, I think that it goes without saying that there's a constant improvement of the conditions that are year by year. Of course, we can always do more and we can do better, and I hope that there are also ongoing talks for the next year budget, and I do believe that they will succeed in talks with the Ministry of Finances and with the government to achieve an agreement for strengthening of the capacities. What I can say is that in the last few years, there was a constant, opportunity for recruitment of new people in order to strengthen the professional, service of the Anti-Corruption Commission to function better. Also, the issue of the premises was solved, and of course, we will continue working on that institution is also for the public prosecution for organized crime and corruption, because that is also a very important institution in the chain of the fight against corruption. In regards to the public administration reforms, we are looking into all the measures adopted by the government. I can speak on behalf of my institution that by the end of this week and the beginning of the next one, we shall consider how to implement those guidelines for all the institutions, or in general. I cannot speak. I have not seen that interview on Top Tema, but I do believe that whatever we're going to do, it will always be done in a discussion with the public administration, in agreement with all the respective stakeholders. And I do believe that the measures that we are implementing and that we're proposing as a government and which should be implemented through the laws, they have only one goal, which is to improve the condition, the shape of both the budget and the public finances, and also to be able to overcome this crisis year with the least, possible consequences. I think that more than that, I think you have to address or to directly discuss with the team, with the government team which proposed the fiscal measures. I can speak on behalf of my institution, but I also can say that the issues regarding public administration reform and also to membership of the EU, but also by the end of next year when we should work on the guide of the reforms, we will include all the issues which are important for improvement of the efficiency of the public administration, transparency, and for attraction, and first and foremost to keep qualitative personnel in the public administration. I do not have any kind of information. There is a decrease in the public administration, employees. It's the first time I hear about that. All the measures, all the issues will be discussed, and I think that we should, by March next year, to have this roadmap which will contain all the issues. For the first time, to be honest, I listened about the decrease of the public administration as a concrete measure. And the last question, no, there was a question for him, but yeah.
First of all, I think it's clear from the report, the message is that negotiations have started. This is a negotiating country. Screening process has begun, but that needs to go hand in hand with reforms, and the reforms need to accelerate. And this report sets out the ways in which those reforms should accelerate. Now, in the screening process, it's true that the Parliament is involved. It has a role, particularly through the National Council for European Integration. It needs to play a role there. But more importantly, Parliament's role will be crucial throughout the accession process. It will be crucial in adopting legislation. It'll be crucial in having proper oversight of the actions of the executive in implementing the reforms. And it'll be crucial as a centre point for public debate about the different issues which arise during the accession processes. So it's going to be vital, and that's why we need a consensus in Parliament in order for this process to move forward, the wider accession process. Of course, screening in many ways can move forward, but we need them to be associated. On the question of the clubs, I've already addressed this, but let me be clear once more. This country has a good track record as regards the relationship between different communities. It's important that the rights of those communities are respected. It's also important that there are efforts by everyone to promote mutual understanding and mutual respect. And I'm sure you'll understand that I am neither competent nor going to go into questions of history beyond that. Thank you.
Добар ден, само накусо до вице-премиерот Маричич, што е последно одредено?
Shortly. Just shortly, I mean, at what stage is the process of constitutional changes? Well, the country report has also noted that there's one of the priorities of the parliament. Still, there's no calendar for the constitutional changes, but I would expect sometime next year to complete that commitment. We have a logical deadline, which is November 2023, when the screening process ends, and when right after that we should continue with the next stage of negotiations. Therefore, it is a matter of organization as well as a management, how we will succeed by mid or September next year to conclude this process. I think that there is enough room for that. And once we have any concrete steps, we will inform the public. But at the moment, still there is no concrete plan, I mean, by the end of the year to start with the constitutional changes process. Thank you very much. We will end.